hosted by Living Waters Museum, based at Center for Water Research at IISER Pune. Today's panel discussion is about history and heritage of Pune's water development. From ancient step wells for capturing and storing water, to historical aqueducts transporting water, to public fountains and modern pipelines. This panel discussion discusses Pune's rich water heritage. For this event, we have diverse panel of experts, and also we have our very own moderators for the same, Dr. Chhavi Mathur and Dr. Pushkar Sohoni. So I'll take this opportunity to introduce to you our moderators. Dr. Chhavi Mathur is a program manager at the Living Waters Museum, and she is also the co-curator of Punyache Paani. Dr. Pushkar Sohoni is an associate professor and chair Humanities and Social Sciences at IISER Pune. Now I hand it over to Dr. Chhavi to take this event forward.
Thank you, Kalyani. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here. As many of you know, the Living Waters Museum is a virtual museum which engages youth in visualizing water heritage and reimagining sustainable, inclusive, and equitable water futures. Through the power of storytelling and technology, we seek to celebrate our water wisdom, inspire youth to look at water from an interdisciplinary perspective, and co-build a digital repository as a source of learning for the future. As Kalyani has already mentioned, the museum is based at the Center for Water Research at IISER Pune. In the last few years, the museum has engaged in exploring urban waterscapes of several cities around the country, like Mumbai, Kolkata, Jodhpur, and Pune. So Punyache Paani is a bilingual virtual exhibition hosted by the Living Waters Museum that celebrates the waters of Pune from the perspective of history, heritage, and people. There are 11 visually engaging and interactive exhibits which have been brought together by a diverse set of partners, as you can see on the screen here. And they communicate narratives about the development of waterscapes of Pune as a reflection of changing times. And today, we have some of our contributors here on the panel. So I would request Dr. Pushkar Sohoni to introduce the panel, and please take the conversation forward.
Hello. Good evening, and thank you to everybody for attending this in person or online. Today we have a set of 4 very exciting panelists who are drawn from the stories that appear on the website for Punyache Paani on the Living Waters Museum portal. And 4 of them straddle different periods in very different ways, starting with the mythological origins of the rivers in Pune, all the way to a colonial public engagement with water as a public service. And I'll briefly introduce you to all 4 speakers today. But before that, let me just say that Pune is one of those cities which actually is situated at the confluence of not 2 but 3 rivers, the third one being largely imaginary, the rivulet called Nagzari, which is always thought of as being the third living water in Pune, which gives Pune the auspicious status of being a Triveni Sangam, or the meeting place of 3 rivers, a site that is supposed to be hallowed for any kind of habitation. In any case, let me introduce the speakers in the order in which they'll appear. First, we have Parag Natekar, who is an artist, designer, and also, as he calls it, a daydreamer who loves exploration and experimentation. He has 20 years and more in the creative field as a designer, as an art director, and he's also the co-founder of Studio Vitamin D, which has been involved with this project. When he's not designing, he prefers his studio surrounded by brushes, paints, and so on. And he'll be talking about the mythical origins of the two rivers in Pune. And that itself is a rich story that takes us back over 1,000 years ago. Next, we have Dr. Manas Marathe, who is an architect and an urban planner with a professional experience of more than 10 years. And he's been teaching at several colleges in Pune for the past many years. He was a recipient of the DART German Academic Exchange and got his master's degree at the Technical University in Darmstadt in Germany. And his areas of research include cultural landscapes, urban infrastructure, and traditional water management systems. He's working currently as an associate professor at VIT's PVP College of Architecture and has been actively researching the historic medieval water systems around Pune, not just in the city, because the city doesn't quite exist as a large settlement for the period that he engages with. Then we have Pallavee Gokhale, who's a doctoral student at IISER Pune and has trained as an archaeologist. And her big interest is, of course, GIS, and she has worked for many years on mapping and plotting the 18th century system of water in Pune, system of water that's quite unique because nowhere else in India do you have this kind of underground urban water supply system on this scale being built in the 18th century. This is absolutely the last time a water system like this was built after these systems were constructed in Bidar, in Aurangabad, in Ahmednagar, in Gulbarga, and also in Burhanpur and Bijapur. And 18th century Pune is the last time a system on this scale is actually implemented. In any case, she'll tell you more about what she's been looking at. And last, we have Swapna Joshi, who is again a doctoral candidate in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IISER Pune. And she has a master's degree in ancient history, culture, and archaeology from Deccan College. And her research interests include architectural history, temple studies, and also medieval archaeology. And she undertook an audiovisual project a couple of years ago as part of a Sahapedia UNESCO grant, which was going to document all the piaus of Bombay. And then, of course, once we started on this project of doing things for Pune, we had to rope her in. And she has been looking at a lot of public water fountains in Pune. And so, without taking up a lot of your time, let me invite all of the speakers. Please, Parag.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Pushkar, for the introduction. First of all, can I remove the mic? Okay. Yeah. So first of all, I stand here as a representative of Today Vitamin D, and we have contributed a story which is, I would rather say, a river map, or the map of the river, a graphical river map. The mythological origin is just a small part of it. If I have to talk about the mythological origin, it's kind of a very stereotypical story. Like we have it in most of our mythology, that there is one Rishi. In this case, it was a king called Gajnak, and he sat for a penance or a tapasya, which made Lord Indra insecure, and he sent two apsaras to the earth to break that tapasya. And he, being enraged by that, he cursed them, and they became the river, which are Mula Mutha, that what we see here. So yeah, so this is our story. So before that, I'll just spend a couple of minutes in establishing the context of why we are contributing here, because somehow I feel we are the odd people out within the whole bunch of researchers and scientists here. So yeah, so we are a graphic design studio based in Pune. Basically, when I say graphic design, we do a lot of communication design, which involves branding and so on and so forth, telling stories, sketching, illustrating, and so on and so forth. And that's a bunch of the team that I would like to mention here, because they have put in a lot of effort to get this story on board. There are developers, coders, and of course, graphic designers. So that's, I'll Archana, Dipti, Vivek, myself, Aishwarya, and Ashwin. So that's the team that I put together the story as well as the website. Yeah. Can we go next? Yeah. Oh, it's not reflecting there. So, okay. So for us, the story started in 2014 when we started a pet project for our studio, which is called Kosh, where we realized, like just a bunch of us designers, we realized that there is so much cultural heritage that we have. But it's very difficult to pass on that knowledge to our own kids. Like I have two small daughters, and even my partner has. But whenever they ask certain questions, we are not able to answer that. And that's the reason we thought there is no such place where we can actually consume content in such a way that everybody can understand. So why not take up certain things where we find, that, okay, this information could be interesting, and create some pride and love for our culture within the next generation. So that's how we started. Is it going ahead? There's some technical glitches. Just 1 second. Yeah. So that's the kind of premise where we started thinking about the project. It is an auto mode. Yeah, so that's the premise where we started our thoughts. And if you see, this is like our forefathers generation, the first, the second is our father generation, and that's where we stand. This is us, right? And then our future generation. And looking at the cultural knowledge, how it is being, getting diluted with the global influence that is, attacking us, I would say. And that's where we thought, we as designers, how can we contribute to this? Next slide, please. Yeah. So that's the question that we started with. We as artists and designers, how can we address this? And honestly, we are not researchers per se, but we are primarily communication designer, and our intent was to, collect all the interesting stories, interesting data that we already have, and put it in a way where it can be consumable. So that's the high level pointers that we decided. Okay, it has to be a cohesive, that it has to be designed well in such a way that the current generation can be attracted to it, not necessarily going back to our folk styles or anything like that, but it has to adapt to the current generation. It has to be curated, and first of all, most importantly, it has to be a condensed version of things, because in today's generation, people have got their attention span very less. So we thought that secondly, it should be visually enriching, objective, it should be objective and not belong to any particular institution. It should be neutral, and it should be symbolic. So Punyache Paani, the story that we contributed here is a part of a larger project, which is Rivers of India, that we've been doing along with other project that we tackle. And it's primarily can we go next? it's primarily a personification and visual map of the river. Now, where are we taking the cues from is our own traditional styles of storytelling. Like if you see this, that's the Pattachitra, which comes from Ahmedabad, and it tells the story of Babuji, a local deity, and it was kind of an audiovisual of that time, or even practiced today at certain places, where the artist himself narrate the stories and give visual cues on the Pattachitra. Then there is a coward example where there are stories within the story, but it's a very visual mode of telling story, right? And these are like sculptures of Ganga and Yamuna right from the Gupta period, where they have visualized the rivers in human form. And this visualization helps a lot to people to connect with these deities in a different way. Taking cues, we started this Rivers of India project, visualizing various rivers. That comes Luni, Yamuna, Brahmaputra, Mahanadi, Ganga, and Koshi. And now we have added Mula and Mutha to it. So that's how it came into picture. So that's, I hope you might have got a chance to see the card here. Our story is more of seeing and less of reading and talking. So I encourage you to go and check the card, or unfortunately, it is not still available for sale as of now. We are still into the printing stage, but definitely we'll keep you posted on that, Chhavi and yeah. Sure. Yeah. So there is a register outside. You can just leave a name, and we will get back to you on that once it is available. Yeah. You want to say? So let's look at a few glimpses of why we have done certain things. Like this is true with all the cards that we have done so far for the rivers. So far we have done 6 rivers, and this is the 7th, or 7 and 8, you can say. So this is not just an illustration, but what we want to tell is all the symbolic, all the each and every element has a meaning to it. Like for example, if you see, in general, the visualization of Mutha is like a Peshwa queen, because the Mutha river directly runs through the heart of the city, and it has a lot of influence of many rulers that ruled Pune, Peshwa being the most important. So some of the symbologies include that, remembrance. Even if you see the dagger is kind of a symbol of the 1961 floods, where things were very difficult. I mean, I have heard stories from my mom and dad what happened at that time, but again, the dagger is lowered and it's no more that ferocious, right? Then in contrast to that, Mula is like a forest maiden, because in general the trajectory was kind of from outside the city at those times, and that's why we imagined her as a forest maiden. It was a very less, there were very less influences on the river itself at that time, not now. Then even like if you see the earrings, they are of birds. So each and every element is imagined with some kind of geographical, cultural, or historical significance. And then the other side talks about, so the one side of the card have the personification of the river, but it also explains what are the symbols and what are the meanings of that symbol, because we don't want this to be a mere illustration. We want people to understand the illustration, because we feel visual is more powerful than reading and words. So if the visuals are imbibed, it's much more easier. The second part is of the map itself, and it's a representative visual map. Kind of, we want to gamify it and layer it in the next version. There is a digital version available, which is on Punyache Paani website, and it will be layered with certain more information and more interactivity in the next version. I mean, it's best that you can go explore. That is what the map is for, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Thank you.
Namaste. Good evening to all of you who are present here and also those who may have joined for the live streaming. Firstly, I'd like to begin by thanking Professor Sara Ahmed and Dr. Chhavi Mathur for giving a young researcher like me the opportunity to present my story in front of you all. I'll also like to take this opportunity to thank Studio Vitamin D, because as he rightly said, being from an architectural background, to give its present form, an interesting form, all credit goes to them. Today I'll be presenting my story, which is on Bharavs, which are about 600 years old structures found around Pune. This is a part of my PhD research. So to be very honest, until 2016, in spite of staying in Pune for more than 30 years, I wasn't aware that such beautiful structures exist around Pune. It was only during my PhD research that I read about them, and then I visited those. And this story provides some glimpses from my research. Next, please. So before moving on to the story, just a basic understanding of what a Bharav is. As the title itself says, Bharav is nothing but a simple stepped pond or a stepped well, which consists of a central shaft which penetrates deep into the ground to tap groundwater in the form of aquifers and springs. It is flanked by a series of steps which usually create a very interesting pattern. Surrounding the steps, you have a parapet wall somewhere between 1 meter to 2 meter high. And on the interior or the inside of the parapet wall, you often see beautiful niches, which are known as Devakoshtha. Once upon a time, these niches housed idols of different deities. Bharavs may be square, octagonal, rectangular, or circular in shape. Usually they have one or more entrances. And as you can see in this image, some of them also have one or more pavilions known as mandaps, wherein you have images of another deities over there, or you can just sit over there and enjoy the presence of water. Next, please. So in my story, I have focused on two Bharavs, one which is found at a place called Mansar. Those from Pune might be aware of this place. It is located towards the north of Pune city, roughly about 65 to 70 kilometers. And another Bharav is located at Loni Bhapkar in Baramati Taluka towards the southeast of Pune. Yeah. Since we are presenting our stories, I would like to tell that these are not mere water structures, but they themselves narrate interesting stories through the architecture. So the image on the left is of a stone inscription, which is housed in one of the parapet walls of the Bharav at Mansar. It is in Sanskrit and in Devanagari script, which mentions the history, the cultural influences, the person who built the Bharav, and how it was taken care of. I won't go into the details of the story. Of course, you can visit the website and get to know about the story. And the next image to the right is of the Mandapa at Loni Bhapkar, wherein the architecture itself becomes a medium to narrate stories from our ancient Puranas, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Yeah, thanks. I think many of you might have seen this image on the flyers or brochures of Living Water Museum. It is again of the Bharav at Mansar. Over here, I would like to emphasize that on Monday, Professor Himanshu raised a very interesting concern that how do you align human behavior with system behavior? And here is where the ancient architecture plays an important role. So as we might all be aware that groundwater is really precious and it is invisible. So if the amount of groundwater which you draw surpasses the level of recharge, it can be really problematic. And the groundwater can deplete very soon. So what our ancestors did was to make the invisible groundwater visible to the people. So people actually see where the water is coming from. In addition, they can also access the water, hear its sound, touch water, which is very important. In a way, it connected people to their water. So over here until today, in spite of being 600 years old, people do come to the Barav because they get a glimpse and experience of water, which is very interesting. So on the day when I visited this Barav, I just interviewed this person and I asked him, why are you getting your kid to the Barav? So he said that he should be aware that once this Barav provided fresh water, drinking water to the people of Manchar. Of course, now it is not used for drinking purpose, but still it is used for bathing and swimming. So this is again a very interesting photograph. That Baravs we often see only from a utilitarian perspective. And the moment I'm talking about Baravs, I get a question, how much is the quantity of water which they give? So I like to tell that, first of all, that is not the concern. The thing is that Baravs are not mere utilitarian structures. They are something more than that. They act as public places which actually bring the community together. So on a very sunny afternoon, you can see how the young men of Manchar, they come here for a swim. And it was surprising, I stayed there almost for an hour and they didn't have a look at their smartphone. So it is in a way very surprising that, how people still use these structures and they become places for interaction, sharing, chatting with each other. Something which is really missing in most of the cities now. Yeah, next please. Coming to the last image, this is again an image which was given to me by one of the residents of Manchar, Dhanesh Raut. I think there is a postcard which has this image. So before the pandemic in 2019, beginning of 2019, all the people of Manchar, they decided that we have to do something so that the water of this Barav remains clean and free from pollutants. So all the men of Manchar, they came together and they opted voluntarily to contribute something so that this Barav is clean, it is desilted, and then you again get a good amount of fresh water, which can be used by the people. So it is really good to know that even today, that communities are tied over water. Something which was again discussed on Monday, that, how do you bring communities together and how do they contribute in conserving such structures? So I think this is a very interesting live case example, how the people come together after, say, every 5 or 6 years to maintain this Barav. So they clean everything which is there. They whatever lies inside, everything is cleaned, and then of course the aquifer which is there, it provides fresh water. At this point, I would just like to conclude by saying that in India, we have always seen at water, be it groundwater, river, or any other form of water, belonging to the public realm. It is something, water by nature, it demands sharing, it demands caring. And of course, water is not about control and privatizing. So I think in today's current time, when water is increasingly being seen as a scarce commodity, such examples point out at the ancient traditional wisdom which lied with our ancestors, and we can definitely learn from them. And rather than imitating such structures, think about how we can use such designs for improving our current water supply situation. Yeah, on this note, I'd like to end my presentation. I request you all to kindly visit the website, Punyache Paani, livingwatersmuseum.org, and have a look at the complete story, and of course, at the other interesting stories also which are there on the website. Thank you very much.
Hello. Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. Good evening, everyone. And I would like to, sorry. Oh, yeah. So I don't want to burden with that number. I'll probably go very fast because most of those are pictures and maps. But before I start, I want to give my sincere thanks to Living Water Museums, Sarah and Chhavi. Honestly speaking, I have been able to present this topic at various forums before this, dedicated to science, dedicated to heritage, in fact, also dedicated to a courage system as such. But this is probably the first time when I'm able to present it in a forum dedicated to water per se. So I'm extremely happy about it. Thank you very much, Pushkar, for introducing. And let me quickly take you through the story. Of course, the story is available there on the Vitamin D created website. I also wanted to thank Vitamin D team for the beautiful website that they have created, and I couldn't resist myself grabbing some screens from the website for my own presentation. Next. Yeah, that's the story on the museum site that you can see. Next. So this story is about water supply system in Pune from 18th century. So this is just a small comparison of what Pune I'm talking about compared to present day Pune. Of course, this probably doesn't contain the newly added villages, but still. Next. When we talk about historic Pune, mostly we relate it with Shivaji Maharaj or Peshwe, but as the epigraphic studies or archaeological studies have revealed, Pune's history or archaeology goes back much before that, almost up to the beginning of the Common Era. So you can read more about this on the website. For me, the story actually has a very personal connect because I have been a user of this historic water supply system because I lived in a Pet area within Pune. And for me, it was a very small, conservative kind of a place where relatives, friends, everybody was very much there within that space. And during summers when there would be water cuts, I was able to actually fetch water from one of the components of this system in Shukravarpet. Next. So these are probably only two photographs which I have been able to search on internet within last 4 or 5 years or so. If any of you have more photographs, please contribute to the exhibit. But what I saw in front of my house was nothing of this sort. Next. It was something like this from where we could actually fetch the water. And then quite a few years later, when I decided to take this topic as an academic study, not just as a curiosity of water, what I realized was this was probably one of the very small components of a very large system that spread across Pet area in Pune. Next. And of course, this is some background of what the system was, how it came into place with the urbanization of Pune by Nanasaheb Peshwe. And the unique part about this system is, of course, it has a tradition of nahars and aqueducts or kares, you can say, which you can see in Persia or Central Asia. And then coming to India, maybe during Sultanate period. Here, interesting aspect that we see is in majority of the cases, underground water sources or groundwater sources are tapped and water is brought through the aqueducts. In this case, groundwater is not used, rather the surface water is collected in the lakes and then transported to the city through aqueducts. Yeah, next. So, of course, there have been a lot of studies about this system and there is a huge literature that was available for me for my own study. So these are just some snippets. There is the list is a lot more, but just some examples. Next. And these are just some tentative locations which Pushkar also mentioned in his intro, where we see systems similar to this. And this is a typical picture of how a Kanat or Karej system looks like, maybe in the Central Asian context or in cities like Bidar or Burhanpur. Next. Now, to bring the system in Pune, it was not that there was a scarcity of water in Pune at that time. And when Dr. Manchu Kulkarni was speaking the other day, he was probably referring to this image where we see where we see a number of wells within Pune around that time. Yeah, it's okay. But most of the, water from most of these wells was not potable. So that was one of the reasons why this system came in place. Next. And you can actually see a process of maps, map creation or data creation in this small GIF. So the project that I undertook was about actually mapping the entire extent of the system, because all the information was available in, bits and pieces scattered around with either with people in texts or in maps. Next. And you can see a expanse of the system. At the bottommost, we can see Katra's lakes and how the system probably comes through the underground aqueduct towards the city. Next. These are the photographs shared by Mr. Bhagwat, who actually has done a lot of work on this system. He also has a YouTube video published some time back where he was actually able to climb down in one of the areas in the aqueduct. Next. The video link is available in the exhibit story, so please watch. And and this is where we actually see the system, underground system of aqueducts, along with the reservoirs or cisterns, the two photographs that we saw initially, along with the wells that are there in the city. So what we are seeing here is, while many of these wells existed, they were still able to plan this system in city without destroying the wells. So we actually see a lot of planning and management and execution happening in this project. Next. We see roads, the aqueduct system going parallel to the road, which makes sense for maintenance purposes. Next. These are like some of the examples which are great learnings when we look at this, not just like a something which gives water, but how it is being managed in the urban space. Previous one. Yeah, this actually shows how much of the area is covered by this by these aqueducts or by these cisterns. Next. And how it actually adapts to the topography, which is quite interesting, knowing that they didn't have the survey or those kind of tools at that point in time. Next. This actually shows us the carrying capacity of water through these aqueducts, and it is actually indirectly telling us about the structural strength of these aqueducts at that point in time. Next. And of course, this is basic statistics that we get from these systems. How many dipping wells, the small openings that we saw were eventually the dipping wells created for maintenance of these systems, and number of reservoirs, the total length of aqueducts passing through the city. Katra's is probably the most popular, well-known aqueduct, but there are 3 more which were constructed later. Next. And this is some graphic showing you overlaying the aqueduct on the present day Pune, as well as on the topographic layout of the city and surroundings. Next. Can you go one slide before? So this entire project was done as part of my master's dissertation at Deccan College. And the purpose was to help people visualize this heritage, because though people knew that this is a heritage, nobody knew where it existed and how it looked. So the purpose was to create a rich visualization. So there is a 3D visualization of this entire system that is available online. The link is also there in the exhibit. Next. And unfortunately, this is how it looks as of today. And unfortunately, we don't have any single cistern or reservoir functional within Pune. We do have some dipping wells or the maintenance shafts from where the water is still available. People use it, but unfortunately, there is probably no system around that usage of water. Next. And this is not part of the exhibit, but of course, these things do come to our mind. And because we are reaching to a wider audience and people in Pune, I thought of putting it here, that it is very much possible that we actually do a wider, serious survey of the system. In this case, it is not just a heritage, but actually heritage which has a day-to-day value in our own lives. And of course, without people participation, we cannot do. This is some picture in Kondwa, which actually has source for Raste aqueduct. But today we have no clue about where it is. So, and of course, we can do better visualizations to reach the people. And if we are able to document it well, even more, maybe it creates a model for other heritage cities within India. Next. And these are actually the real life examples where some effort has been put in from the government or administrative side to actually use the water, or in case where the water cannot be used, at least create a heritage value out of it and bring it to the people. So yeah, next. Thank you so much. And these are the links available. Thank you.
Good evening, all. Thank you to the entire Living Waters Museum team for this opportunity. And thank you to Pushkar for writing the one article on one of the structures that we'll see soon, which actually urged me to look forward and try to get into it much more. So the story that I'm presenting to you today is the story of two very lesser known yet vital facets of water heritage from Pune, Pyaus and Panpois. They are colloquial expressions of public water dispensing facility, which can be commonly found on roadsides, but often remain overlooked. Drinking water fountains, locally called as or generally known as Pyaus, were built in many Indian cities during the colonial period. Of course, were brought in by the British. They were built along tram routes, inside markets, gardens, and many other public places, usually built with altruistic motives. As the outcome of philanthropic efforts, the city of Pune has two of these structures still extant in cantonment area, both erected sometime during the early 20th century. In their vicinity, what we see on the right are also found Panpois, which essentially are water dispensing units which have been set up in the last decade or two. They are more or less in the same format, in the same utilitarian format, function, and motive as the historic Pyaus, but much more simpler in form. While all the known Pyaus in the city are defunct, that we see on the left, and in an utter state of despair, most of the Panpois are nicely functional and taken care of by the local groups. A Pyau is a structure that can generally be between 5 feet to 20 feet, with a water spout, bowl, or basin, a commemorative plaque, preserving the memory of the deceased, and generally providing details of the patrons. Next, please. Panpois are not at all a rare occurrence. You move out of IISER campus and go towards Bane Road, and I'm sure you'll come across one or two. They are found in multiple places across the city. This story brings forth only the few that engage with the historic fountains in the cantonment area and how these two interact or do not interact with each other. Next, please. This Pyau is situated on Modelina Road, the same road where there is SGS Mall, in a corner where once stood the famous Napier Hotel. It is built in the memory of an eminent personality, Khan Sahib Dorabji Dadabhai Bhuti, in around the 20th century. Next, please. This street is interesting as it has not only this dysfunctional Pyau that we saw in the earlier slide, but also a fully functional Panpoi standing on two opposite sides of the same road and showcasing the change in the nature of public water dispensing units. Next, please. The Panpoi is frequently used by auto rickshaw riders or other commuters who halt there, as must have been the case of the Pyau 100 years ago. Next, please. The other Pyau that we know from Pune is located outside Rani Lakshmibai Udyan along the East Street. It too lies neglected, camouflaged in the surrounding chaos, as we see in the imaginary sketch, and often used as a corner to stack empty garbage bins. Next, please. The plaque reads that it was product of an effort by Indian community to perpetuate the memory of Lieutenant Colonel H. Minchin. Next, please. The area surrounding Solapur Bazar Police Chowki towards Pulgate is a cluster for many Panapois situated next to each other. And this is the case at many places in the city. If these are dispersed at a certain distance, their purpose would be much better utilized. Next, please. Within the Panapois as well, one sees a change. Some are in the more traditional form of earthen pots, like we see here, with the steel mugs. At the same time, next please, we can also see newer methods, newer structures being donated by the city residents as Panapois, but similar thoughts have been borne in mind by the patrons. Next please. And the quest is still on, it still continues, as this exquisite structure still remains untraced. An old sketch exhibits the artistic fountain with beautiful gables, water basins, gargoyles, the fencing around it. An old newspaper clipping writes that it was erected on command of the Duke of Connaught to commemorate the Queen's Jubilee. Designed by J. Adams, who was the architectural executive, engineer, and surveyor to the government. The sooner it's mapped, Water Heritage of Pune would have another feather in its cap. But till then, we need to be on the lookout for in the rifle range, in the cantonment area, in the Khadki cantonment, or wherever possible. Next, please. Thus, this story that I just presented through photos and illustrations is an attempt to give an impetus to document, utilize, and cherish various such pyaus and Panapois, which I'm sure you will now acquaint yourself more as you traverse through the lanes of the city. We can easily pass by it, but miss taking note of. Their existence is known in some cases, but identities are lost in most, and definitely sustenance is what we need to strive for. Thank you.
Yes, while the panelists come and join us here on the stage, let me thank them for fantastic presentations. Again, the themes, really stretched from the first millennium of the Common Era all the way to the 20th century. And we looked at various engagements of the city with water. Again, this is part of many narratives collected by the Living Waters Museum, celebrating water in Pune, particularly water heritage. And while we open this up to questions, I think it's important to note that all the participants really spoke of looking at the past, not only as some kind of historical artifact, but as a source of knowledge, as a source of wisdom, that we can manage our water better in the future. And with that, I'm very happy to open it up to questions. And Chhavi, please. Okay. And if anybody has questions, I'll be happy to take them. Do we have a second mic? And if nobody else has questions, okay. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question to Pallavee. You showed us the map of the Pune old map where the stream and from the Katra's duct. It looks similar to Ambil stream path, which used to be once upon a time before. And we are also finding the groundwater systems as well as the aqueduct systems quite close to each other. So is there any connection over there, or it's just what our observation?
Of course, we don't know 100% about what happened, but there is a historic information which mentions that Ambiloda was diverted because of the frequent flooding that happened in the core parts of the city. Interestingly, what we see is the same, not same, but a similar course is being used for the aqueduct. So in fact, while I was rereading about many of these things in last few months, it appears that if the depression was already available, probably the same was reused for laying out the aqueduct for the system, which is quite possible, but we don't have a confirmative.
In the case of Bijapur, we know for sure that a lot of the aqueducts rely on groundwater sources to recharge wells. And so you have aqueducts which are not completely lined with stone on the inside, but actually leave one side open and earthen. So water keeps percolating through. And so your mother well or source well or lake is not the only place which feeds the aqueduct. It also charges along the way. But we don't have that in Pune. We really have closed aqueducts and everything comes from a source far away. No.
I doubt for drinking purposes, but it's like the entire network is not existent as of today. So it is already broken in so many pieces, but wherever the maintenance shafts have been available, people have been able to fetch water, but we don't really know the extent up to which the part is intact unless we do the survey. It appears there are some locations around Katras or Bibewadi area, but yeah.
Sorry, it's although it was asked to Pallavee ma'am, since I have been also studying that, you rightly pointed out that some sources do mention, as she said, that Nana Sahib Peshwe diverted Ambilodha because there was an incidence of flooding and some Brahmins were actually, they lost their houses. But what is also interesting, while I was researching on the British system, especially Pfeiffer and other British officers, they had surveyed this area, and they also, their first attempt before building Lake Pfeiffer, that is Khadakwasla Dam now, was to first check whether this system can be reused. So there are many letters which have been exchanged between them, which actually first check whether the Katras system can be sort of restored and used for Pune's water supply.
And also in the case of the new system that the British bring in, one of the big worries for them is the Leith Commission's report, which is a sanitation report. And malaria becomes a big worry. And they do not want to have a lake, which is actually a weir, in the proximity of the city. And so they're very happy to have a dam far away, bring in water through a canal, and then have it processed at a distance before distributing it. But the old system which brought water from Kathraj, south of the city, let it flow through and then discharged it into the river, is the same logic that even the British waterworks use, because when the right bank canal gets water to the Parvati waterworks, from there it's almost gravity fed all the way to the river. Questions?
So my question is to Manas. So structures like Baulis or Barags have a cyclic connection to groundwater. They help people connect with the groundwater, but also help to recharge the groundwater through the rainfall or other mechanisms. So how do the dilapidation of those structures leads to, affects the groundwater, the aquifers that they feed through?
So to be very honest, I'm not much into the science of groundwater or recharge, but what I understood is actually very few of them survive, in the condition which you saw in the images. So you could, while I was just doing a survey in Pune district, you could say that maybe 90% of them, as you said, are in a dilapidated condition, and they are used actually as dump yards. Okay, so people just dispose of their household waste. They are used for immersion of Ganesh idols and so on. So I think if immediate notice is not taken, there are chances that we are going to soon lose these heritage structures. As you said that what happens in this case is since people have that sense of belongingness, especially in Manchar, it has been somehow maintained, after every 5 years. And that is why it is there. Even its steps were repaired sometimes. So that is why they are there. But otherwise, not all of them now supply good fresh water also.
Right there.
Thanks to everyone for really great presentations. It was very interesting for me. One sort of theme that I could see coming through is the fact that everybody was mentioning that you want to conserve heritage. On one side, Parag was talking about making it more palatable or use to the current generation. There are also instances where heritage is still being kept relevant in the Manchar Bharat. But this, I think, is also a very big question, and I wonder if any of you have any thoughts about it. Going from beyond making heritage palatable or approachable, is there any way it can be made relevant to current day? Because if something is not relevant, even if it is palatable or not, do we have any hope for its sustenance, survival beyond the standard archaeological survey of India kind of places?
My take would be, of course, making it relevant is probably the most important thing, because otherwise people cannot relate to it. So in my case, the very early effort was to actually let people know what they think the heritage is, because they had no clue. Otherwise, we don't know. It's just a line in the heritage list of Pune Municipal Corporation, but nobody knows where the heritage lies. Secondly, to make it relevant, in this case, I mean, the case study that I presented, it's actually a usable heritage. So if I happen to use it in my day-to-day life, despite it being a 300, 400-year-old system, it becomes very, very relevant in day-to-day life. But I felt that that could be done only if we have basic data sets of this system. So yeah, that is what I would say.
To respond to the question, I'm not exactly sure how the story that I presented and the drinking water fountains that I spoke about can be exactly made relevant in Pune, but similar efforts that have been made in Mumbai, and there they have been able to not only conserve the structures, but as well provide water facility over there in areas like busy markets, like next to Masjid Station or bazaars and even Crawford Market. And people use it on a day-to-day basis. Like tea sellers get their water from there. They no need to have to travel a kilometer or so to get their water. So in that way, it is becoming relevant for them and being utilized.
I think now this is something from our perspective, that how we see it. The first step to relevance is familiarity. And if we don't know what that is in the first place, how can we talk about relevance? Like, honestly, I didn't know most of these stories myself. So getting acquainted with the story is the first step. And you may not find a very practical relevance as of now, but the historical relevance makes a lot of sense, even if it doesn't make a practical relevance. So that way, I think it's having doorways at least to at least introduce these subjects and getting to know them. It is also as much important.
What I observed when I visited these barrows and other places is that this is my observation, that rather than people in urban areas, the rural areas people from rural areas are willing to come out of their comfort zone, which is, I think, is very important if you want to make them relevant or bring them back to use. Because if you saw in Manchar, although they have an excellent piped water supply system, then they would have just simply neglected it. but it is their wish and their this thing attachment with which, you know, they carve out that time after every 3 years. Each one contributes in some way. Someone brings the pump and to extract water and so on. So yeah, these structures which are away from Pune, I think people are looking after them. But soon, you know, as they are getting urbanized, it is becoming difficult also. So I think we all should take that one step to come out of our comfort zone, you know. Otherwise, interestingly, there was a survey conducted, I think, in Delhi, and students were asked that where does milk come from? And they said that mother's dairy tanker. So they didn't knew that it comes from cow buffaloes. This is what is happening, you know, that we have lost that connection. So I think once we get things in the right perspective, I am at least hopeful that they matter a lot. Yeah, thank you.
And again, I think making it palatable, it is not necessarily dumbing it down. It has to be, there has to be a first step for everything, and that's how it needs to go. If we make it very overwhelming, that also becomes a problem. So that's important.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I think a raw nerve has been touched, I think, by that question. So I'll just, I don't know whether it's a question, but maybe it could be posed as a question also, because in Gujarat, actually, these pyaus which are there are still very much existent because of the hot climate context. And a lot of birds and animals also are given a lot of water, and people are very, very sensitive to it, and the community participates in that. Maybe there are people who are call themselves the urban may not be doing. I'm being harsh with myself and many of us here, but I think a lot of community who are from that place and understand the context of that place are very sensitive to it. And these pyaus are very, very strongly still visible in Ahmedabad, and people try to preserve it, whether it's an architectural interpretation which is seen, or whether it's in the form of a pot, which which is, and they'll cover it with a lot of that khas ka jo rehta hai na, they'll cover it. And like even when I go to Ahmedabad or Gujarat now also, even if I forget my bottle, I'm fine with it because I know I'll get good water on the way. Actually, I don't have to worry, but here I have to carry my water. So I think whoever the person has touched a very raw nerve actually, and I'm thankful for that, actually speaking. So if you can add a little more to its Swapna, right? Yeah, if you can add a little more to how more things can be done to preserve it, actually. Yeah. Thank
you. So I think, as you rightly said, we just need to more and more acknowledge it, or like Parag added, we need to know that this exists. I started looking at these panapois or pyaus when I was for the search of them. And like you said, there are so many in Gujarat. There are many in Mumbai and Pune also. So once we know that they exist and they give you perfectly fine cold water, then you can sustain. Like I did this exercise of going into the field for looking for them without water, and I could sustain for a day. So I think acknowledging is the first step, and then any kind of material preservation or their ornamental sense can be taken up.
I just thought of adding something, that we spoke about making it relevant mostly in terms of using those in the present day context. But I also feel that making them relevant in their own context is also very important. For example, when I was discussing this project with another colleague of mine in HS's department, she started asking, so do you know which were the, what were the socio-economic groups of the people who were able to use this water, or were there any areas of the city which were not given supply of this kind of a system purposely, or what were the reasons, which actually opened up a very different aspect of this entire system. And I realized that there is a lot more that one can study about the same system rather than just a water supply system. So I feel that such topics are probably making it more relevant even in the for the historic studies themselves.
Actually, thank you, Pallavee, because my question is quite
in continuation of what you just said. It's more of a socio-economic question, so it's open to everybody. I am very curious about, see, water it used to be a community-based thing earlier, and we were always divided on the lines of caste. So what is the history, or, how is it, first of all, is it evident even now that there was division, looking at studies or whatever, available data, and how was this overall, distribution, how was it in Pune, on the line, Pani ka division on the basis of caste?
I may not be able to give a very granular answer, but based on the data or the literature that I have come across, for the cisterns or reservoirs, which are actually the outlets of this aqueduct system, at least in the map and some literary sources, we see mentions of private and public. And we actually see private being located within the premise of mansions or vada, which we popularly call, and public many a times on the roadsides or in the premise of temples, etc. And of course, we know the names for many of those and the locations. But yeah, we do see that. But again, when I say public, I'm not really sure if it again has some specific group or, yeah. So, but there are possibilities and we need to study more probably. Yes, yes. Yes.
So this is just a comment by Anita ma'am. She's saying, thank you to the person who asked this question of relevance, and Living Water Museum exhibition is one step for creating awareness. So that's just a comment from her. It's just a thought that came to my mind about panporis, of how is this different from water ATMs, which we now see coming everywhere? Is it similar concept or is it different?
So I feel water ATMs, how much ever I have seen, have much more commercial angle to it. These are generally a small group of people, maybe a rickshaw union or a Nana Nani Park resident members who decide to do it. And also it's, I feel, much more cost effective. It sustains longer, and it gives you naturally cool water instead of the water ATM mechanism that it uses. And some of the water ATMs, I'm not entirely sure about all, but some of them on CST station in Mumbai, you need to pay a penny or two, very minimal amount. But here they generally are free of cost. So yeah. Also aesthetically, I feel these are much more pleasing than the water ATMs.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the lively discussion over here. And thank you for all the fabulous work you guys have done for the exhibition. Just wanted to make a comment, a quick feedback on the question that Joy, I think, asked. So in Kutch in Gujarat, many of these small step wells, an NGO called Samarth, and I sit on their board, were revived in the summer of maybe 2018, 2019. And in a place where piped water was coming once in 10 days, these small revived step wells provided water security for 600 households. So that is, a very important piece of data for us to understand the potential of reviving some of these structures where the aquifer is active, as I think Himanshu also pointed out yesterday. For those of you who've been to Jodhpur, you would have seen in the marketplace in Sardar Bazaar, one of their very well-known step wells, I'm forgetting the name, Chuji Kanala, has been revived as a public-private endeavor, supported by the hotels and shops around that step well. And it is a place where the people of Jodhpur come and sit every morning, evening, whatever you want, they're there. And there's, little cafes and all around it. So that's one more thing. One of the things we've realized with our work on step wells in Ahmedabad was that many people didn't even know that a step well existed in their backyard. That was the kind of response. And now, I've just come back from the 9th World Water Forum in Dakar in Senegal. And this is the first time where that water heritage has been put on the agenda of the World Water Forum, which for those of you who in the field of water know is a rather commercial, I mean, it obviously brings together NGOs and networks and all, but it's also driven by industrial and corporate partnerships in the water sector. So for water heritage to be on the agenda, it was very in a smaller way, it was on the agenda in 2018 in Brazil, but it's now fully on the agenda for the World Water Forums. And it is something that UNESCO and ICOMOS are pushing for the review of the water decade, which will be in 2023 in New York, in March next year, whatever they call it, to really appreciate the value of what we can learn from water heritage. Understanding the past for addressing the future kind of a thing, but also because this is, and as we mentioned on Monday, that the theme is groundwater for the World Water Day, many of these water heritage sites also depend on groundwater. So in the context of groundwater and the groundwater challenges that we're facing, also to look at water heritage. So I just wanted to put this into a larger macro context that there is definitely now global interest in water heritage. It's not just from a water museum lens. I mean, of course, water museums are very much a part of this conversation. Not, you know, there are many water museums around the world, but it is now recognized by the UN as something that we need to be looking at. And I would really like Pallavee and Swapna and maybe Manas also to think of doing a water heritage tour for us. So not just the river walks, but I actually want to see, you know, where these aqueducts and fountains and all are. So maybe we can think of that. Yeah, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
So this question is to Manas or even Pallavee. Okay. This is a question to Manas and Pallavee. And it is particularly regarding the communities who contributed to the construction of these structures. So whether during your research, did you come across any of the communities who were involved with the construction of these structures, and what is their condition today, maybe? And whether the construction technologies and the knowledge associated with that, is it still alive or it is now lost in time?
I'm really sorry that I don't really know much about the people who actually constructed this. One thing which we can actually see through the history of construction of these aqueduct systems is, even though Katras aqueduct was built first, we do see another one coming up almost 40 years later with little differences in the building material that was used by Nana Fadnavis for the newly developing part of the city. So we see that the similar system is being implemented in other part of the city. In case of Katras, the water was being sourced from a lake. In case of Sadashivpet aqueduct, the water was being actually sourced from a large well somewhere on Simagad Road. Unfortunately, I haven't come across, or that was not the part of literature that I could read. And again, this is probably one of the things that I mentioned earlier, that there are so many other aspects to study the same system, and probably that could be another one.
This question is also, I've been thinking for many years, but we do find some vague references of communities in some of the Peshwe diaries. And they mention special people known as Beldars, sometimes even Mahars are mentioned, who were experts in actually blasting quarries or maybe blasting stone. So it is probable that in case of the Katraj aqueduct and other aqueducts, these Beldars were used. There is also a mention that the main Katraj lake had to be desilted every year just before the monsoon. So at that time also a British officer said that he had hired these builders and he had mentioned the volume of silt which was extracted. So this is as far as the aqueducts are concerned. I think in case of other places, Burhanpur, Bijapur, we do have name of Persian engineers, not exactly the people who may have been hired for making it. But in this case, in case of Pune, we don't have either the name of engineers also, I guess, specific person. Huh. So that is there. In case of Bharavs, again, the stone inscription which is there, it does not mention the community who actually built it, but the name of the patron is there. He was a person called Ladi Dev, who was actually the village head, a village head's son, and he actually patronized the construction of that Bharav. But this is actually where we have to do research, that who are actually the people who built and whether this knowledge still exists.
There were well-digging communities, and these were artisanal, and they were largely Muslim communities. And there still are one or two of them around. We have people like Professor Basavada from Sept University, Pushkar Sohoni. So we talked about these things and how to find these communities. And I think we also know in terms of access then to the water or to the step well, in fact, they didn't have that. They were building it, but then they were denied that access. You know, all the reasons why. So.
And certainly in the case of Bidar, we know that these systems have been revived by retraining people who have not received traditional training, but there have been activists who've decided. So Vinay Malge in Bidar, Professor Govindan Kutti from Kerala, who also works in Bidar and Gulbarga, they've studied the systems enough and figured out enough that they can actually train a whole pool of labor to keep them. And unless you can conserve them in some way, these systems will never function. So as long as Bidar has a big air base and large grounds are going to be left as they are, the system will work. But the minute you have a bit of construction, these wells will never get recharged. And
add something about the Bidar aqueduct, that a couple of years back, it was back in news because of the revival and lot of people taking interest. And this is an example where it started becoming relevant. They actually organized a huge conference titled Courage on Cultural Borders. And I'm happy that I was part of it. I could present case from Pune, and there were people from all across India, all the cities that you saw there, almost people from all those places came, presented, also international speakers. Unfortunately, nothing happened after that. I tried to follow up with them because I wanted to do something for the system in Pune, learn from the systems in Central Asia, how people are studying those, etc. But then this effort started and unfortunately died down so early. So I do hope so. Yeah. Yes, they have a special center dedicated for Karnats. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a small point to add to what Manas said. Like he mentioned, it's the Beldar community who is involved in quarrying the stone or taking it through different stages until it reaches a stone course. So it's the whole Vadar community, and they have their different groups where it's designed that who quarries the stone, who carries it from the quarry to the place where you need it, then who dresses it in the first place, and then who finally gives it the designed or the desired surface decoration, because that depends upon where it's going to be used. It is the Patharvat community, and then depending upon that ornamentation, their groups divide. But it's overall the Vadar community, and in a project we had documented them long ago, and most of them still are functional in Kolhapur or Sangli, Satara, where even now they function in the same way. They have their different groups decided that who will work on what. And like he mentioned, generally the Bharavs are associated with temples. So the Baras were also essentially quarries from where the stone came from for smaller temples. So it was the local community, the local chieftain who was generally funding it, and people from the nearby villages who were from these communities who helped in that construction or building.
Thank you. Ranjit this side. Here, primarily as an aware citizen, more so after watching the presentation. So pardon if my questions seem, bit lower or something which probably doesn't fit the forum. But these are thoughts that came to my mind just now. First is, while we say that water is a scarce resource, it is also probably the most free scarce resource. So has the lack of an economic cost associated with its end use been one of the reasons for the neglect that we see today? Had water been a priced commodity back then as well, would we see a different picture? And are there lessons in that approach for us today also? That is the first question. The second is, on the note of revival at a heritage level, I see that, and then on the other side of the spectrum, we have these issues of, climate change mitigation that we speak about, right? We already, those news articles about how the water supply might get affected this year are already starting to creep in. And we are looking at very high temperatures, wherein this whole aspect of where does water fit into, or the sustainability aspect of it. Do we see a link there? Can that be explored? And lastly, again, as I go back from here as a citizen, can I have bullet points that I can take back, which I can then make part of normal conversations, dinner table conversations, or even on a social media tweet where I can say that, if you want to work towards conserving, these are the ABCDs of it, right? So something of that sort. Thanks.
So to answer the first question, please correct me, Sarah, if I'm wrong, but treating water as a commodity has been tested in many countries. And if I'm not wrong, it has not worked. Once water was charged, maybe its price was increased, there have been actually wars between common citizens and the government. So pricing water doesn't work. So is fuel also now. It has increased so much, yet people are not trying some other means. But this is where I would like to go back to what Parag sir said, that what we today call as mythology maybe, or legends, they were the driving forces which actually made communities respect water. Today in the scientific world, we think them as, maybe outdated knowledge or something. But if you still go there, I showed you the image of the niches which were there. So the mere presence of some idols of deities ensured people that they don't pollute the water. So these were some of the ingenious ways which were used by our ancestors, so that people, rather than understanding the price of water, they understand the value of water. And as also she rightly mentioned, being a part of temple also, the moment you are there in that sacred precinct, that psychological game starts. And this is how, people learn to value water. Then your second question, I think, was about climate change and sustainability. So I think, again, as Professor Sara really mentioned, now there is an emerging trend to look back at these traditional systems and not, there are two opinions. One of them who really romanticize them to such an extent that they are going to solve all the problems, and others who completely neglect them. So I think somewhere we have to strive a middle way, that whether they can supplement the existing system. So even if we have to see if they reduced our dependence on piped water systems, say by 10 or 15%, it is going to make a big difference. But we are not trying this middle path. We are just simply divided between these two, whether they are useful or not. And third question, I think maybe I can just write bullet points and give it to you later rather than answering. But if anyone wants to add, I think they can add.
yeah, just maybe 1 or 2 points, because he probably listed all the correct points for your tweet. Uh, with respect to aqueducts, I can give a small comment actually. I think it's a huge failure on the side of common people like us, as well as on the administration, because despite knowing, being users of this huge water supply system, we as in I'm saying collectively, we common people and the administration did not take any notice or did not take effort to record of this system while the urbanization was taking place in the core parts of the city. I mean, now today, when I go back for the study or talk to people in these areas, we get to know that yes, the aqueduct was here, then there was a foundation being laid, and then there was flowing water for the whole week, which was being pumped out. Finally, a cement block was put in and the water was stopped. Unfortunately, we have no record of such incidences from the city, which could have at least told us that these were the areas where the system was actually experienced of something of this sort. And so I would say, and this could have been done, because if you actually look outside India, where the culture or the heritage being perceived differently, we actually see that whenever new construction, development, infrastructure kind of work is happening, they actually have somebody called as archaeological observer, who is observing, who is actually looking at the excavation that is happening. If something of interest comes up, it is not necessarily that you have to, halt the development. Like Manas said, it has to be like either heritage or metro. It doesn't have to be like that. There could be a middle way only if we take active effort for that. Unfortunately, we don't have any such active interest to do things on these scale for these things. And secondly, I would say, I mean, this is just from one experience, but I would say it would be common in the city. For us, probably the value of usable surface area is unmatched. I have seen a huge well in one of the Pet areas in Pune, completely covered by a cement slab, where the water pump is put on it and the parking area is being created. So I think that explains, because well is supposed to be open to air for all the water circulation and the aeration and everything. And I think examples like this probably are very serious.
I think coming to your first question, actually, what I feel is, I mean, charging water, something like what water ATMs are, is a similar thing, right? And it is really not about, the answer won't lie in that. So like going back to Ahmedabad, the example, I've been in Ahmedabad for a very long time. And more than for people, they have a habit of keeping a bowl of water or something for the birds and the animals. And that comes only from the intent, right? So the answer lies somewhere else, and it will be very intangible answer probably, that how can we develop respect and that intent to make it like a more human activity rather than something else.
And about pricing water, water has been priced in the past when it's been consumed on an industrial scale. So if you go to Vijayanagar, you go to a lot of places, including in Khandesh, they have these systems by which you time the flow of water and you pay accordingly. So if you let water flow into a field for half an hour, you pay for it. It's a nominal charge, but it's just to ensure there's no wastage. So again, like Manas said, there probably is a middle ground where not everybody has to be charged for everything, but people who use in excess of an ordinary usage certainly should be. Questions, anyone? All right. Thank you all again. And thank you to all the panelists. This was most wonderful. And hope you join us for the Living Waters Museum and the Center for Water Research events as we roll them out in the future. Thank you. Oh yeah.
Sorry, there are a couple of announcements that I need to make, and I know we all want to meet them informally, but so there are yeah. So this book is kept away to take away. The the card which the vitamin D has made is available. If you want it, you can write your mail IDs. The book is kept outside. And also there is a book, Whisper of a Life. For that as well, you can leave your email IDs. Oh, sorry, Whisper of River. And all the panelists and volunteers are asked to wait for a group picture after it. So thank you.
Yeah, so tomorrow we will assemble again here 6 p.m. and a slightly different program. We'll have a few movie screenings and a few discussion all around water. So do please join in again. Marathe.
So there is a last comment from the live streaming session. Anita ma'am again says, very engaging and interesting session happened today. Thank you LWM for this initiative. And thank you to all the panelists, Parag, Manas, Pallavee and Swapna. Thank you.